let's look at the Fota project. In 1973, there was a big oil crisis. The price of oil went from about $2 per barrel up to 20 or 30, and the Arab states turned off the tap. And some of us were queuing. It was like trying to get an All-Ireland ticket, was trying to get a tank of petrol. And there was chaos all over the world. So a lot of countries started talking about, look, we can't be relying on this oil forever. So in Europe, this was the first time the 12 countries came together. Look, there's no point each of us doing the same thing. Wouldn't we be better off working together on wind energy, waves, solar, geothermal? And UCC was one of the leaders in Europe in wave energy. But they also started looking at photovoltaics. And the whole focus was on increasing the efficiency of the solar cells. But towards the end of 1980 or 1970s, they decided to put research into systems. Now, they started with small applications, but the commission said, okay, let's build 15 systems around Europe. There was one out in some French Guiana or something, so we won't talk about that one. So they built 15 systems all over Europe. And of course, the Mediterranean ones were there. There was one in Germany, 2 in the Netherlands. There was one in Southampton, and there was one in Ireland on Fota. So that was one of 15 European systems experiment. Now, it made no sense economically. There's no way you could generate the electricity to pay it back. It was an experimental thing, but Fota had something very special, the name. It was called the Fotavoltaic Project. And everybody was talking about the Fotavoltaic Project. Now, nobody could name any of the other ones, but it kind of stood out on its own. Now, in Fota, everybody was told you can build any way you like. So the whole idea was to try different designs, how they'd be mounted. I was looking at the mounting there, Ollie. There was a whole research on that. What kind of cables, how would you mount them, all of these kind of things. So everybody was to do their own thing. And then we met every year at a big every year then there was a big conference where we all came together and compared our notes and so on. But in Fota, we did something different, which I'm going to show you in the next slide. So here it is, 50 kilowatt peak, 2,775 of these modules. It had a battery storage and it was connected directly to the grid. So that's the kind of language that we had. And it was a pure experimental base. And Michael Loftus joined in September?
1983.
1983. So Michael, and you can tell them what you were doing. I was supervising you, so I'm after forgetting what you. I knew it had something to do in software. So now, where it was located. Now, I met Conor O'Driscoll. I visited Fota, and is that the first fair? You have to remind me. Is that the first?
Yeah.
The first fair. And what's this one then?
That's the 18th.
That's the 18th.
Yeah.
So there's the club here, and there's your, what do you call it? The
Maintenance building.
The maintenance building. Yeah. So that's where Con keeps all the equipment. And how many people are working?
About 17 full-time.
Full-time. So all the machinery for the golf club is there. And that's where it was located. And Con will tell us what happened there. But it was physically in that location. Now, that's what it looked like. And John, there's John O'Malley. Yeah, you were, and who else was involved in it? Yeah, you were involved with.
I worked with Builder.
Yes.
And who did the basic structure, like,
right.
That was including building the block and stuff that you see there, and the steel work for carrying the photovoltaic array. Okay. And we did the steel work, yeah. But I showed you a picture. There was an 80-year-old man mixing concrete. Yes. Who was he? He was named Mick Ryan was his name. And he was he worked with us. He was about 80, you know. Because I remember one time I said to him, "Why are you here?" He said, "What business would I have at home?" He said, "You know." And we showed that on his way home. He went into the Bishop Stone Bar for a bite. Okay, I was wondering would I use it or not, but I showed it to John later. Now. This is the frame. So there was a steel frame all the way across, and these guys here came up from Dunmanway. Jerry Donovan
from Ballymakeer, of Firebird fame, had a contract for installing, and each one had to be mounted individually. Now, personally, I thought it was a terrible design. They were using steel bolts on glass, you know. So, but each one had to be mounted here. But there was something very funny happened one day. You know, Paddy and myself are from West Cork, and when we come to East Cork, we get completely confused in directions, because in West Cork, we use north, west, east, and south. Just like in our house, we'd say east in the kitchen, or east in the room, west in the kitchen, because we know where the city is and we know where the sea is, and subconsciously you're directed. But if you take a West Cork person to the other side, like I saw Carrigtwohill West coming here, and I said, but this isn't West, even this evening, you know. So this guy would be on top, and there'd be another guy underneath holding the bolt, and you'd hear, move the ish there a small bit. And you'd hear the shout, that's not ish, that's West. That's ish. So this constant bickering was going on. So they sat down one day, look, this is not working, you know. So they call this wall here the Carrigtwohill wall, and they call this wall the Denanway wall. So it was great fun with these particular people, and it had a huge battery. Now, there was a guy working with me called Michael Hagerty, who had spent 20 years in the submarines with the British Navy, so he was an expert on batteries. And we would push those batteries. So that was a big part of our research. We tried different charging regimes. We tried charge it over 10 days, charge it over 1 day, and batteries started exploding. And he'd be bringing me in and say, do you see that stuff falling there? Because he knew batteries like we know, whatever, today, our own expertise. So he was an expert on batteries. And this was a big part of our research. So when all the batteries started failing all over the Mediterranean, that's why they brought us out to inspect the battery systems. So that was one of the things that was unique in Fota. We had loads of sensors all over the building. We had about 80 sensors, because it was linked to the university. The other systems, they just built them and looked at them. Whereas we had a full weathering station, loads of sensors. And my job at the beginning was to design the control system and the monitoring, and later to analyze the data. And I think, Michael, we were trying to develop models that would predict what would happen. And if it didn't happen, we'd try to go back and improve it. So today, Killian, when you do your calculations, you're typing in my house and latitude, and it comes up with an answer. Some of that software was developed by these kind of projects. So there's the photovoltaic system. In front of it, Con was asking me about this. There was a big farm shed. And in front of that was the UCC farm, and it was set up by Professor Tom Raftery. And the milk from that farm went to UCC for processing and research. So it was a real research base. It was owned by UCC at the time. And there's an aerial photograph. And Con, we were looking at those trees there. Some of those are still there, I think, at the back of the shed. So Con, I'll send you all these photos. But there was one photograph here. Oh, do you know what? I was trying to remember who these people are. Does anybody reckon?
That might be Frank Morrissey.
No, yeah, Frank Morrissey.
There was Frank Morrissey.
Frank Butter.
And there was Frank Bottomer.
Frank Bottomer is in the video.
They were both there anyway at the time.
And this man here was, does anybody know who that man is?
It's not J.J. Kett, is it?
No, J.J. Kett was up in UCC. I know J.J.
J.J. was down the farm a lot too.
He was, but I couldn't remember. I knew him so well, I couldn't remember his name. You know, I met him every day when I was down there. But Con, I think you need this. Con, I think you need this up at the wall of your shed. That's the 18th fairway coming up into the first fairway. And that's, you know, so it was a real interesting place, and it was all farm. You have none of those pictures, Con. They'd be nice when people come to visit your office and so on. Now, there was an official opening, and it was I had a thick folder of newspaper articles. It was big news at the time. And Michael, you arrived a few months later, so you missed the official opening. And the official opening was done by Hugh Coveney, Simon Coveney's father. That's myself there with a nice head of hair. And next to me is Mr. Hawley. So if anybody wants to know what height Mr. Hawley was, this is Professor Rickson. He was the brains behind the whole thing. He became president of UCC later on. This man is John Montague, the poet. because they commissioned a poem for the opening of the plant, which I'll show you on the next slide. And this is Michael Martell, who was president of UCC at the time. And all of them were there for the day. I was there every day. They just came down for the opening, a lot of them. So, and Professor Rickson turned up every now and then. But for me, for about 5 years of my life, I was there either in person every day or monitoring it remotely. And even Sundays, and my daughter Sylvia, she was born in 1984. And whenever we got to Fota, we'd always call up to see the plant, to see how it was working and so on. So she saw this big triangular building. And I told her I was giving this talk, and she told me that when she went to school when she was 4, they were asking all the children, what do your parents do? And she said, my father works with the giraffes in Fota. So she thought the building was the giraffes building, of course, for a 4-year-old. But again here, there's the start of John Montague's poem. High summer and Fota Island is in bloom. That should be hanging above Con. You know, and in the next slide, and I'll be putting this up on YouTube or whatever, but I'd also, Michael, if you want a copy, or Jim, if you want a copy of the PDF with all the slides, we can do that also. But way down here somewhere, they refer to Hyperion. And people say, where did I get the name for the company? I got it from John Montague's poem, that Helios was the god of the sun, but Hyperion trained the horses and all this sort of crack, you know. It was also a famous racehorse. Here. So that's where we got the name for the company when I was starting the company. So there's the full poem. If anybody is interested in it, I can scan it. Well, it'll be in the handout. Now, there was an official opening in 1983, and there was a band, there was a dance, there was a platform for dancing and, you know, catering and everything. But of course, everybody went home in the afternoon. And I had to stay because myself and a few more, and the tent people came and took away their tent. The music people left. Somebody took the trailer. But lo and behold, in the middle of the first fairway, Con, was a piano. Nobody was to collect the piano. So the piano was sitting there literally in the middle of a big field with the photovoltaic system behind it. And that's the famous Michael Haggerty there. Playing it. He was the brains behind the battery work and so on. So he called it Rhapsody in Blue. So again, he got a good kick out of that. So he died this week. That's it. I was going to ask him here, but that's how it goes. Now, there's some other famous people worked on the project. Michael, stand up there. I put Michael in.
That's the better version.
That's it. So Michael is from Carrigtwohill, and Michael joined the project in September, as you said, 1983, and he's vice president of MTU. So yeah, I'm proud to say he's one of our people. Now, this man here, Noel Cotter, he's actually one of these people here. He's from Dunmanway, but he left Dunmanway in about 1986, and now he's the largest PV installation business in San Francisco. So Killian, where's Killian if you want to go to San Francisco? This is your man here. So, and he said before he came to Fota, he'd never seen a solar module. And then he went out to America and he says, well, I'm an expert on installing photovoltaic modules. And it grew from there. And it's the biggest company in San Francisco. So I think he'll be home this week.